Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of My Money, My Rules. I am so glad you're here. We have a guest today, and his name is Alex Huff. And Alex, he likes finance just like I do, maybe even more because he studied it. All right. And I don't even want to begin to try to say what it is his licenses are or what his degree was. So I'll let him take that. Alex, what did you study?
Hi, I majored in economics and finance, and that's just one degree, but uh, two majors rolled into one. I got into being a financial advisor just because I asked my academic advisor what kind of careers I can do with, and I kind of got into economics and finance just because I was general business and happened to like my economics and finance classes the most. So I decided to go that route, and then mentioned several different types of jobs that I could do in banking and in different areas. But what interests me the most was being a financial advisor, and I got to shadow a local Edward Jones office there in that college town. And what really sealed the deal for me was I went with him to meet with a client at a nursing home who had just lost her husband.
Oh, wow.
And she was so overwhelmed with not only grief, but also worry and fear for her financial future. And he was able to reassure her that she was going to be okay because of the plan that they had made. And I saw that, this job is really about making a difference. It's about helping people. And so that's what attracted me to it. And so I got my Series 7 and Series 66 licenses, insurance license. So I help people with all kinds of financial products and solutions, with retirement funds, with life insurance, annuities, all different types of investments. And lately, a lot of like short-term CDs has been a hot topic because interest rates have been so high.
I'm sure.
But all kinds of financial products, basically.
You mentioned something when you said you were talking to your academic advisor that kind of reminded me of a situation that I had. You said that you had taken some finance classes, and it
Mhm.
made me think that as you were explaining it, that maybe you were majoring in something else, and that's how you ended up in those classes to begin with to find out that you were interested in them. Or did you
Right,
just
exactly. I was, yeah, just general business. I didn't have any real specific area of focus at first.
Okay. Yeah, see, that's interesting because for me, I wish I had found out, if I had to do it over again, that's what I
Mhm.
would definitely would have studied. I would have gone into finance, no doubt about it. But
Mhm.
I double majored in TV journalism and Spanish. And
Oh,
the first one thing that I had majored in was TV journalism, but I had to take Spanish classes. And I had to take Spanish classes for that degree, ended up liking that more. And so that's what I kind of concentrated on. So I thought maybe your
mhm.
situation was similar, but you always knew you wanted to do business of some sort, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah, but that was just really a kind of a shot in the dark. I mean, my parents' general advice was, you know, get a major that you can get a job with,
Right.
you know. So that's all so my mom taught psychology in college, and she recommended I didn't major in psychology because she said and
Yeah.
there's very few jobs that you can get with that kind of degree.
Yeah, that can be a rough one for sure. So, one of the topics I wanted to talk about today with you for sure is that, and if you don't mind me asking, how long? Actually, I'll ask you this first: how long has it been since you've graduated?
Yeah, graduated in 2014, so that's 9 years now.
Okay, so to see that's way more recent than me, and
Mhm.
that's important because that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because you are much closer to having been in college than I was when college was much cheaper, and even back then it seemed to me like it was expensive. But then
Mhm.
everything that I read now, I'm like, wow. The amounts that tuition and everything is now. I'm just amazed by this. So you are much closer to that. And since you are, I think that that'd be good for our listeners if they happen to be going into college, because you're not fresh out, but you're close enough to where I think you've definitely seen a lot of the rate increases. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you for our listeners is, we get hit. I mean, I think people still get, what's the word? I don't want to say pressured, but there's a lot of credit cards ads out there. You start getting stuff in the mail and that kind of thing. Do you think, just in your opinion, that somebody that's in college ought to have a credit card? And if they should, how should they use it? And did you have one actually when you were young in college? I ended up having one my last year, and I didn't know what to do with it.
I think I just had a debit card. I'm not 100% sure when I got my first credit card. I know that I had a very expensive bag of Funyuns one time because I had gotten just what I needed at Walmart, and my brother happened to be with me, and he said, "Oh, in the checkout line, have you ever had Funyuns before?" I
I
said,
know
"What
what
are
I
they?"
think.
He was like,
Yeah,
"Oh, they're kind of like onion rings, but without the onion." I'm like, "What?" And so I made a little impulse buy, and added a bag of Funyuns to my order at the very last minute, and that exact thing was what overdrafted my account and costed me a $25 fee. So it's joked that was the most expensive bag of Funyuns I ever bought.
yeah.
Of course, the
That's
way
better
inflation
than
is going, it might not be long before we see $25 bags of Funyuns.
yeah, yeah. Well, I guess that's better than a splurge of buying an iPhone that you didn't have the money for.
Fair
But that is
enough.
funny that all it
But
takes is
but
something
to answer your
small.
question, yeah, I don't think I had a credit card, because if I had a credit card, you know, I probably would have had, over the course of a month, enough time to, come up with the $2.50, to pay it off. But no, my general advice, I would say the safer thing to do would be to just avoid it altogether. However, there is a benefit to building credit if you can stay disciplined to pay it off every month. But that
Sure.
has to be your plan, is to pay it off every month. You um, charging up to your credit limit and only paying the minimum is a surefire way to get yourself stuck in a financial rut that is going to be
Exactly.
very difficult to get out of.
Exactly.
So that's why credit cards can be so dangerous. You get, and credit card companies, obviously, they don't really make any money off of you if you pay it off every month. If you pay it off every month, you're not paying any interest, and you're building your credit. So you're winning the game if you do that. But if you charge up to your limit and you make the minimum payment every month, they are making truckloads of money off of you, and they are winning that game, and you're
Right.
losing.
Right. Well, whenever I thought, this was a misunderstanding I had, whenever I first got a credit card, I thought the moment you scanned that thing, I mean, the moment you ran it through, you would be paying interest from that day. And it doesn't work like that, of course. It doesn't start to charge you interest until you get your statement and you choose on whether or not you want to make the minimum payment or just pay it off, like you said.
Right.
And so I think that a lot of people would probably be smart enough to know that, well, okay, I'm not going to go out and take a credit card and run it up as hard as I possibly can. But I do think that there are a lot of people out there that probably think of a credit card as sort of like an emergency type thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I need this money now. I'm going to go ahead and borrow. And if I have to make the minimum payment for a long time, so what? I would
Well,
go ahead.
I would say that having access to a line of credit as a truly a backup emergencies is fine, but it's much better to have cash in a checking or savings account or money market as your emergency fund. Even though you're not going to make, nowadays you make a little bit better interest than you could have, even a year ago, but the rates on those types of accounts, they go up and down, but what you make on it really doesn't matter. What matters is that's your emergency fund for your rainy day. And that's what you tap first if you do have an emergency. And if it's a really big emergency, and then, worst case scenario, your car breaks down and you have to have that car to get to your job, then I've had to put car repairs on credit cards before, and it's not ideal. And I had to pay a lot more for that car repair than I otherwise would have, because I ended up paying 20% interest on the balance that carried over. But also that's, the 20% is an annualized figure. And so if you're paying it off over the course of a year, then you're really only paying 20% interest on about half of it. So it's having a credit card for emergencies is not terrible, but buying a new pair of shoes or buying, a new, the newest, latest, greatest gadget is not an emergency.
Yeah. So in other words, you want to know, if you're going to use a credit card, it would be very wise to know exactly what it's going to end up costing you. And that's why you should have an emergency fund anyway, is to take care of whatever that emergency is that comes up. So yes. Okay. What would you say is the number one mistake that young people make, being in college? It's been so long for me, I can't remember. But again, since you've studied finance, can you think of the number one mistake that young people make, particularly in college, but it can be after college, it can be a young adult too?
Yeah, I would just say, not thinking through, how the financial consequences of certain things. And that can even be, when I was in college, a lot of my peers really didn't worry about, how expensive college was, because there was student loans that were going to, it was all being taken care of, quote unquote, by student loans. But taken care of by student loans means you're gonna have to start, making
and that's
payments
exactly
on that
what I
eventually.
did. That's exactly what I did.
Yeah, and if you take out large student loans and you're studying in a major that's not that might be leading you to a field that it is not very much in demand, that's where people get into a lot of trouble with student loans. And another thing, I mean, federal subsidized student loans are pretty good. They've been very gracious over the recent years to defer payments ever since COVID-19 broke. And so that's great. But if you've got private student loans from a bank, they're not those, they don't work with you. I mean, it's just you're and typically they have higher interest rates, and they are much more difficult to pay off, because every dollar that you pay to it is less of it's actually going to principal, and more of it's going to the interest.
Right.
So, be careful about what type of student loans you take out. And be careful, honestly. The conventional wisdom is follow your heart and learn what you're passionate about. And there might be some instances where that's good advice, but actually thinking through what your career plans are after college is important, so that you know that you're going to be in a position to actually keep up with your payments when you're through.
Yeah, and I wanted to add something to the deferred payment. Like whenever you get out, and if I remember correctly, they give you like 6 months anyway before you have to even start making payments on those loans. At least that's the way it was. Of course, this was back in the 90s for me, but but also the part about deferring. Now, if I remember correctly, even if you defer them on some types of loans, the interest will continue to accrue. Do you know, is that true?
That's the difference between a subsidized and an unsubsidized
That's what
loan.
I
So a
thought. That's what
government
I thought.
subsidized loan, the interest does not accrue while you're deferring, but an unsubsidized loan does.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's something to remember, for my listeners, if they're like, oh, great, I can put off my loan. Well, not so fast here. You need to always, 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 well, really just, it's not as serious as a credit card, but you need to think about what is this going to cost me by doing this, and make sure that you know exactly what it is that you're basically with those, you're buying the ability to put it off in a way, or at least it would be a good idea to think of it that way if the interest is continuing to accrue like that. Okay.
Yeah. And labor market conditions have been pretty good lately. There's been wages generally have been increasing in most fields. But um, really having a career plan, and not just assuming that you're going to make necessarily the median wage in your field is the year you get out of college without any experience. You're not going to be making that. You get there eventually, but you're not going to be making the median wage in your field your first couple of years right
Of
out of
course.
college.
Right. Right. And I was going to tell you about something that I did in college, and it was kind of unique, a little bit risky, but I did it, and it ended up working out. But I also feel like I kind of got lucky, and that is that I bought a house when I was in college.
Mhm.
Now, looking back now, I would have never done that again. Just, if I went to college again now, I would be like, I'm not doing that, because I didn't realize how long it takes to sell a house. I didn't realize the amount of time you got to wait. But the reason why I did it was because it's a long story, but I'll make it short. A guy I knew was he had bought a house with no credit, without anything like that, and he just had a lawn mowing business basically in the summer. And he would mow enough lawns in the summer to where he made it last the whole year for himself. He didn't even have a high school degree, I don't think. So excuse me, he went and he found an owner financing type situation. And so the owner of the house let him buy the house from him. And, the owner acted as a bank. And long story short, I ended up buying the house. We ended up in a situation where I bought it, and I ended up renting it out to two other people while I was living in it, because it was a 3-bedroom. I got $200 rent from each of those people, and my house payment was less than that. It was like 300 and something. So here I am renting out rooms, bringing in 400 a month, only paying 300 and some dollars a month. And then at the end, whenever I graduated, I sold it, but that took a while. And so I thought that was a really good deal for me, because that was much better than going and,
Yep.
quote unquote, throwing money away on renting.
Mhm.
But what would you think of, like, if you were advising me
Mhm.
whenever I was younger and I told you, yeah, I want to buy a house, what would you have said?
I would say that can be a great investment. Houses, can be great investments if you're in an in-demand area, close to a college campus. Is generally going to be a great location to buy a home if you can find one that you can afford to get financing for. Um, the one main caution I would give to our listeners would be, make sure you're going to be there for at least 2 years. Because if you buy a house and then turn around and sell it in less than 2 years, you have to pay what's called capital gains tax.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully you've made money on it. Let's say you bought it for 100,000 and you sold it for 150,000, then you have to pay taxes on that 50,000 if that turnaround time was less than 2 years. If it's more than 2 years though, and it's your primary residence, you actually don't have to pay taxes on that 50,000. So that's a really great thing. I know some people that accumulate rental properties in this way. They will buy a house, live in it for 2 years, and then buy another house and rent out the first one. And then they use the rental income that they get from their first house to make their mortgage payment on the second house. And then they might already have a little bit extra After that, or if not, then certainly by the time they get to the third house, in 4 years' time, they've already got quite a nice extra stream of income.
Right.
I mean, people can do very well with that, but you do have to understand that it's not foolproof. It's not guaranteed. There are things that can go wrong with that kind of strategy. If you turn around and sell a house within 2 years, you get hit with taxes. You could have a foundation problem. You could have, sometimes if something goes wrong with the house, it can be very expensive to fix. If you have a hot water heater, go out, you do want to make sure you have, enough insurance coverage, because, any type of, anything could go wrong, whether it's, a hailstorm or house fire, or, you even want liability coverage, because if you're renting rooms out, to roommates, and one of your tenants gets hurt because of something that went wrong with the house, then you could now all of a sudden get sued for $1 million. So you want to have, some insurance coverage. So it adds a level of complexity, I would say, but it's certainly worth it if you have the right opportunity come along where you can. And one other caution I would give is that, the long-term trends, on average, housing prices go up. That doesn't always hold true. 2008, 2009, there was a housing crisis, and housing prices went down across the board. And then, in different local markets, there's going to be just, maybe due to natural disasters, or maybe like, let's say there was a large employer in that area that closed up shop and moved the production overseas. Now the property values in that area are going to go down, or sometimes property values go down because the neighborhood, the city is maybe just poorly run, and they're not repairing the streets and keeping up with trash collection, and all of a sudden, any number of things could happen that could cause the value of that house to go down, instead of up like you expect it to. So you just understand that there is a level of risk. There is, and so, but if you have a reasonable expectation, reasonable reason to think that this house is going to be as much or more in demand, in the future as it is now, then I think that's a great idea.
Sure. And, it's, you want to be buying, to add to what you were saying, you want to be buying a house where they're adding jobs, preferably, where the jobs are on the uptick. A lot of times a university town can be good because, universities aren't going anywhere, and then people need a place to stay. So, but yeah, I agree with what you said. And I think I got lucky. In fact, I graduated in the year 2000. So I was in college basically during the late 90s, at the worst possible time to be in college. I mean, in the sense that it would have been nice to have a job and everything was booming back then. Then I graduated in 2000 and things just kind of fell apart. The dot-com bubble burst, and here I am like, okay, what do I do now? And then I have a house to sell. So it took me like 6 months to a year or something like that. It still played out fine. It was just very inconvenient for me to have to travel back to that town, for different reasons, but it ended up working out. But again, I can't say this enough. I just got lucky, and I fixed up the house a little bit too. That was the best thing. And you were talking about the prices. I know she said, "Oh yeah, you buy it for 100,000 or this much." I bought that house for 35,000. I mean, that's how much
And
prices have
100 is low
changed.
now. I use that example, and our young listeners are going to be like, "You can't buy a house for 100 or 150,000.
Yeah,
What are you, crazy?"
it's just a good number to use, though.
You really can't. You really can't even. Honestly, there's very, very, very little houses out there. Even, we're in Northwest Arkansas. I don't know where people are listening, but very few. Median house prices, I don't. I'm sure is at least 200,000.
Yeah. Yeah, for
So,
sure.
it's less, that makes it more difficult to do now than it was, when you did it. But it might still be possible if you have a decent personal savings, if you have a job with decent income, and yeah, I mean it's yeah, it can if you can do it, I would say go for it, generally speaking.
Yeah, I'd make sure you're going to be there at least 2 years. I mean,
Hmm.
planning on 3 or 4 years would probably be even better, just because you want to give yourself time to be able to sell the house
Right.
too. So, and who knows what kind of economy that we're going to be in that time. So there's that risk too. It's the macro risk as well.
But
Okay.
that's thinking honestly, Justin, what you did, that's thinking like a business owner.
Yeah.
I mean that's that entrepreneurial mindset, and not everybody has that, type of entrepreneurial
Sure. Of
mindset.
course.
Um, you know, but if I mean, if you can do it, you probably should, because it's fortune generally favors the bold.
Very good. Very well put. Like that phrase. Okay. How much would you say that people should have in savings? And I'm talking about, like, whenever I first started reading, and it's been a long time ago, it used to be have at least 3 months put back for emergencies. Then it went to 6. Then I saw some people say 9, and then I saw people stretch it out all the way to a year. So I remember whenever I was seeing those changes, I was thinking, my goodness, if people think it's anywhere from 3 months to a year, I'm betting that that kind of depends on what the economy was like when they wrote that. So I'm wondering, what would you say would be the amount of savings you should have for emergency expenses in case you lose your job? That'd be the worst if you lose all your income somehow, and other things too that are like cars and things like that. What would you say is the amount nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, I like you, I've heard numbers anywhere from 3 months to a year, and that does depend on a variety of things. One thing to keep in mind is that it generally takes 6 months for unemployment insurance to kick in, so that's why it's a good idea to have 6 months of living expenses saved up. But for a young person, that can be a real stretch goal, because I would say start with what is doable. So if you have no savings at all, start with $1,000. And once you've reached that goal, then pat yourself on the back, and don't go out and spend a lot of money, but get yourself an ice cream, and then
Yeah,
start working towards the next goal of 3 months of living expenses. And once you've reached that goal, pat yourself on the back again,
yeah,
and then start working towards 6 months, and
uh-huh.
so on. And if you can get to a year, don't carry more than a year's worth of living expenses in cash, because then there's other things you could be doing with that money
Right.
that will be better for you long term.
Okay. Yeah, I've very rarely seen anybody say longer than a year. But
Hmm.
I would say also, if you end up saving enough money for a year, I've never seen anybody regret that either. Never
No,
heard
yeah,
anybody say, "Oh man,
exactly.
I
Because
wish
that
I
that
hadn't
just gives you
saved so
more.
much."
It gives you more freedom, to do something that maybe you want to go and travel around Europe for a year.
Uh-huh.
That might be the experience of your life, and while you're young is the time to do that.
Right.
So, I don't think, like you said, I've never seen anybody regret that. Um, but some people do, save up a lot of cash and
Mhm.
not have any other investments, and
Right.
that can be not the most efficient not the most efficient way to run your finances long term.
Especially if inflation comes knocking at your door.
Exactly.
Right. Well, we have to wrap up here pretty soon, but I did want to ask you one last question. And this is a good one, I think, to close on. If you could be young again, if you could do it all over again, would you do anything differently? What would be like the one financial thing you might change, if anything? Maybe you've always been smart with money though, because you studied it. But I like to learn from other people's mistakes. That's what I tell people whenever I'm asking them what would you do differently, because I don't. Why should I make the mistake? They made the mistake and I can learn from it, right? So did you
Mhm.
have anything that you would want the our listeners to know to avoid?
Yeah, so I've had over 10 years since I started college, and coming up on 9 year 8 year 9 years since I finished college. If I had if I had started investing earlier, I mean,
I knew you would say
there's a
that.
rule in investing called the rule of 72.
72, right?
And I think you ask any investor what's the one thing that they would wish they would have done is if I just started earlier.
Right.
Um, Especially once when you're talking about time frames of 10 years, if you average, the rule of 72 is you take your rate of return divided by 72. That's how many years it takes for your money to double. So
Right.
simply put, if I had started investing 10 years earlier than I did, then I would have twice as much money as I have today. Assuming if 7.2% average rate of return, which is, with all the ups and downs that we've had, that's as good of average as any. Obviously, you could depending on what kind of time frame you're talking about, you could find investments that have done much better than that, or investments that have done much worse than that. But 7.2 is a pretty achievable number in terms of long-term average return. And so then 10 starting, so if you start investing at 25 versus 35, that could be the difference between having $500,000 and 1 million when you retire at 65. If you start at 18 versus 28, that could be the difference between having 1 million and 2 million when you're 65. So those first 10 years, it feels like you're not getting anywhere, but the last 10 years is where the magic
Exactly.
happens.
Exactly. And what Alex is talking about here for my listeners, and I was going to talk about the rule of 72 on a different show, but that's it's compounding is what it is. When you double your money in an amount of time, like he said, when you first get started in that first 7 to 10 years, whatever it is, you don't feel like you're getting anywhere. But oh my goodness, does it take off toward the end? And so you need as many doubles as you can fit in there before you retire. Even one extra double, so to speak, could mean the difference of what he was just saying between, say, $1 million and $2 million. So, yes, I had a feeling that would be your answer. So, and I bet, I think you're right. I think if I asked just about any person that's into finance that question, they probably would say the same thing. Start earlier. You cannot start that too early.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, excellent, excellent. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the show for today. But Alex Huff, he's in finance, and he's with Edward Jones, of course, as you can see in the background there, and he has an office in Bella Vista. You're still in Bella Vista, right?
That's right.
Bella Vista, Arkansas, and we're both in Northwest Arkansas. So you know where to find him too. So thanks, Alex, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Justin. It was an honor.
All right.